Hey, this is Scott, and today we're going to be talking about video tripods, what makes them so special, and what kind of differences you might be able to expect from some of the lower end models to those really expensive ones. So the price on video tripods can range from relatively affordable to extremely expensive, and a lot of people that haven't had experience with video tripods just yet might not understand why they're so expensive and what makes them so different from just a standard tripod. Today I'm going to be using this Teris TSN6, which is a very affordable but a very high performing video tripod, to show you some of these points that I'm going to be talking about. So basically, when you're talking about video tripods, there are going to be a couple of points which are going to be the things that you're going to want to look at when you're deciding which one is going to be the one for you. Counterbalance is one of the main things that I think makes a good tripod so good. And what counterbalance is, if you don't have that much experience with video tripods, of course it's going to balance your camera, but what that means is that if you have this properly balanced and properly set up, when you tilt this forward or tilt it back, you can just let it go and it will hold itself in place. And of course that's good for safety reasons. You don't have to worry about your camera dropping down and getting damaged, but also that's going to make it really easy to get really nice starts and stops to your movements, because you don't have to rely on the power of your hand to hold it in place or to come to that smooth stop. You can really just move it as you need to move it, very, very lightly, and then just let it come naturally to that stop, and it's going to make things really, really smooth. The counterbalance range especially is going to be something you want to pay attention to make sure that your camera setup, including everything, monitors, batteries, whatever you put on there, is going to fit within that range. There are two types of counterbalance system, and one type is a continuous type where you really dial it in very, very precisely. You can get exactly the amount of counterbalance that you need, but the downside to that is that you have to dial it all the way in from zero. So you're going to get your camera balanced at zero, so that way you can know whether or not it's really centered on here, and then dial in your counterbalance. So every time you do that, it's going to be really a pain physically, and also just it takes a long time to dial it in very accurately, but you can dial it in very accurately. A tripod like this Teris has a stepped system, and in this case there are 4 steps of counterbalance, and so that's going to be kind of preset different levels of counterbalance, and you can find one that is close to your camera setup, and then again with the drag you're going to make up for the difference there. But this is a much faster system, so you're going to just turn it off and then turn it back on really, really quickly. So if you're going between different camera setups, if you take your camera off and then you put it back on and it's lined up a little bit differently, you can get things balanced and get things going very, very quickly. Once again, this is where some of the differences between cheaper and more expensive tripods are going to come to play. With stepped systems especially, you're going to see a big difference in the number of steps. Some tripods will only have 1 step, which is to say that you cannot even adjust it. Other tripods will have 4, 5, 7. I've seen as high as 16, but those get really, really expensive. Your drag settings are going to work together with that counterbalance to kind of make up for any imperfections. If your counterbalance doesn't perfectly match the weight of your camera setup, the drag is going to kind of compensate for that and help to hold it in place and help to get that really silky, smooth movement. So good performing drag, nice smooth drag, is also going to be the difference between a cheap and a more expensive tripod. So back here we have the settings for the counterbalance and the drag, and before we go ahead and get this camera setup balanced, you want to turn this all the way off, both of these, so that way you can really see the most clear how your camera itself is actually balanced on here. But make sure you have everything locked down before you turn that off, otherwise it'll just fall under its own weight. Before you unlock this, make sure you're holding the tripod, because again it's going to be just loose now. And with this tripod in particular, you have this little lever under here that you're going to loosen, and this whole top plate is going to slide back and forth, as you can see here. And that's going to be how you find your balance. So if I have it, let's say just around here, you can see it's falling forwards. If I slide it back too far, it's going to be falling backwards. So you just want to find exactly where it's pretty much balanced right in the center there. That looks pretty much good for me. And then we're going to lock that down in that position. If you have a tripod system with a sliding plate, it's going to be the same process, just by sliding the plate back and forth until you find that balance. So now that we have this pretty much balanced, we're going to dial in that counterbalance, and I'm going to go all the way up to the max for now, just to show you if you have it too strong, it's going to spring back up on you, and that's too heavy. If you have it too low, this is still going to be falling under its own weight. So you want to find exactly the right balance, or the closest possible. So for me, this is pretty much holding itself in place right now for the most part. So we're going to go ahead and leave it at that, which on this particular tripod right now is set at 3 for the counterbalance level. After that, again, like I said, to compensate for the difference, you're going to want to dial in your drag. And I'm just going to go ahead and put that at 4 right now, because I like it to be heavy. And you can see that now it's holding itself in place very, very nicely. Finally, down here we have one more ring that's very similar to this one, and this is going to be the drag in this panning position. So you can have it very loose if you want to get faster movements, or very tight, I guess you could say, but again, it's very smooth, but this is going to be for a lot more control. The more drag you have, the less you're going to see the little vibrations from your hand's own imperfections, because you're fighting against more resistance, I guess you could say. So if you have it set all the way this way, every little movement of your hand is going to show up in your footage, but if you have this set to a little bit higher, it's not going to show up as much, because your little movements are not going to actually create as much movement on the tripod side of things. Finally, there's some of these smaller details. There's the height of the tripod, if it's made from aluminum or carbon fiber, which will affect the weight. On some new tripods like this Teris, for example, you have a quick lock system, which makes it a lot easier to make higher and lower than some of the other tripods, which you have so many different locks you have to fidget with on the middle and the bottom. This is only in the middle. This middle lock here will unlock both sections as it extends higher and higher, which is really a huge thing for me. It's a small detail, but it makes it so much easier to switch the heights between different shots, which of course will get you better quality shots, because you're going to get what you really need. But a lot of times tripods will have a lock here and then another lock down on the bottom, and that means that if you want to extend the bottom section of the legs, you have to reach all the way down to these bottom sections, and that's really awkward and really difficult. So what they did here on this Teris tripod is they have only one lock in the center here, and that will unlock both sections, but the bottom section won't extend until the top section is fully extended automatically. And the same for collapsing it. So I'll just show you now as I loosen these locks and then put it all the way down. That's it. As I extend it higher, extend it all the way up. 1, 2, 3, and I'm good. I don't have to reach down to the bottom, which, especially when you're dealing with something this high, could be really awkward. But again, if you want something even lower, they have this little guy here, this mini tripod here, which is really great. Again, you got that 75mm bowl on the top, so you can take this head off of here, put it right onto here, and you can get some really low shots. And this bottom spreader can even extend a little bit too, so you can get lower than this, but this is already really low, but it's going to be really solid. It's a very good little tripod to have with you on all your shoots, because you never know when you want to get really low. These legs in particular here are carbon fiber, so they're relatively light. These here are aluminum. They do have an aluminum version of this as well. They have a bunch of different versions of this head that will give you a higher payload or a lower payload, and just a whole bunch of different things. So you can find a setup for whatever it is that you need for your particular camera or your particular overall setup with batteries and monitors and everything like that. So just keep in mind you want to think about your overall weight of your setup and find a head that matches that, and then this is going to be a great choice for you. And then there's other details like the bubble level. Is it illuminated or not? And again, that's a small detail. Unfortunately, this Teris does not have an illuminated bubble level, but some tripods this will be illuminated. Either pushing it here or pushing a little button underneath will make it light up, and that's really useful when you're in a dark situation. This one in particular does not, but still it is there. And you have this lever at the bottom that you can just loosen, and that will allow you to get this tripod, the head of the tripod, actually level no matter how the legs are set up. So if you're a little bit on uneven ground or the legs are extended at different lengths, you can always find this to be perfectly level, and you're going to have no problem with your actual video footage being uneven. You also want to think about the quick release system. Some tripods use the Manfrotto standard. This one in particular has a drop-in style plate, which is very quick, but it's not going to be compatible with your Manfrotto plate. So if you want to switch back and forth, that's not going to work. However, this is very quick to use, and again, I'll show you that in just a second. And then there's also, different proprietary plates for different brands. And you have just a number of different ones on the market. So that's something that you also want to think about as well if you're planning to go back and forth between tripod and maybe a gimbal or some other setup. So like I said, this tripod has this quick release plate here that is just going to kind of drop and snap into here. So really, it's very quick and easy. And that's it. That's as simple as it is. So you don't have to worry about trying to get everything lined up and sliding it in here, which is often kind of annoying and kind of embarrassing if somebody's watching you do it. This will just drop in really quick. To take it out, they have this little lever at the back. You just slide it over and take it out. Very quick and easy. If you're doing things like taking this off to get your white balance and then putting it back on, you don't have to remember exactly how this is lined up every time, or you don't have to worry about rebalancing it every time. If you take this off and put it back on, it's going to be in exactly the same spot. So you don't have to go through the whole balancing process every time, and that's a huge help. So if you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them down below. If you like this video or found it helpful, don't forget to give me a thumbs up. Subscribe to see more in the future, and as always, thank you for watching.